Hello and welcome to the second episode on enforcement and the adjudication machinery in the Companies Act 2013. To discuss this subject, we have the benefit of the company of Senior Counsel Mr. UK Chaudhary and Dr. Sanjay Kumar, who's the Executive Director Legal in Bajaj Hindustan Limited. Can I begin by asking you to elaborate a little bit about the framework of the tribunal mechanism set out in the Act, which takes over from the High Court of the old law? How is this tribunal constituted? What character it has? What sort of checks and balances does the Act give for the tribunal?
Let me start saying that the entire corporate jurisdiction is now consolidated into National Company Law Tribunal.
Right.
It will deal with the present jurisdiction which is being held by the Company Law Board. It will also deal with the jurisdiction from the company courts in the various high courts. It will also deal with the jurisdiction which is currently exercised by the Board for Industrial and Financial Reconstruction. This is constituted under the Companies Act, where the members will be judicial as well as technical. The chairman will be the judge of a high court with minimum 5 years experience as a high court judge. The members will come from the various areas of expertise, which will be the company secretaries, the chartered accountant, the lawyers, with a specified period of their experience in the line, and also from the government of India who have worked in the concerned ministries. From the National Company Law Tribunal, the appeal will go to the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal, which will be the only appeal hearing body from all the NCLTs, and the decisions, either interim or final, will go in appeal to the NCLAT.
Okay.
The second appeal from NCLAT will go to the Supreme Court of India.
Only on questions of
Only
law?
on the pure question of law.
Right.
This is how the mechanism will come into force to deal with mostly the entire civil original jurisdiction. Now will be dealt with by National Company Law Tribunal. The first appeal will go to the Appellate Authority, and the second appeal will go to the Supreme Court of India.
Right.
Thus, the jurisdiction of High Court is no more there on any matters.
So, be it winding up, schemes of arrangement, all those
areas.
actions which are erstwhile domain of the High Courts would now be in the specialized
will be
tribunal.
dealt with by the National Company Law Tribunal. I can name all of them, that right from the reduction of capital,
Right.
Into the scheme of restructuring and arrangement, which is known as the schemes of compromise and arrangement with the creditors and the shareholders.
Yeah.
Similarly, that winding ups,
Right.
and also the
Oppression.
special offences,
Right.
like Section 633,
Right.
where the exemptions can be granted, all will go to the
Oppression
National
and
Company.
mismanagement.
Oppression
also,
and
right.
mismanagement is already with the Company Law Board.
Right, which should move to
The
to be retained
appeals
by
against the refusal of the transfer of shares and rectification of the
Right.
register of members is already with the Company Law Board. That will also automatically get transferred
transferred
and
to
be taken
NCLT.
over by NCLT. Similarly, the rehabilitation and the revival schemes, which is currently held by the Board for Industrial and Financial Reconstruction, will also, original jurisdiction will go to the NCLAT,
Right.
and the Appellate Authority of BIFR will also get abolished, and the appeals from revival and rehabilitation scheme will also go to NCLAT.
NCLAT. So these are fairly powerful and
Very
important bodies that have been created under the Act.
Yes.
Therefore, what sort of composition does the Act require, particularly the appellate tribunal, to have?
So the appellate tribunal will be, the chairperson will be either the retired Supreme Court judge or a retired Chief Justice of a High Court, which is a quite comparable, honorable position in
Right.
terms of integrity as well as in terms of experience.
Right. And this is quite similar to the Securities Appellate Tribunal under the SEBI Act.
Yes, and similarly, in the NCLAT, also the constitution of each bench will be that there will be one judicial member, which will be either a retired High Court judge or a member from the judicial side,
Right.
who will have an experience as a lawyer or as a judicial officer at the level of a session judge.
Right. So one of the experiences in other tribunals has been that the tribunal members, by the time they grapple with and get acquainted with the subject, become due for retirement. And I think the Act addresses that by giving a slightly more liberal retirement age. Can we throw some light on that?
In terms of the age factor,
That's right.
yeah, it is.
According to me, there are two issues which have been taken consideration of. Number one is that in the case of the retired person, there is a little longer tenure where each retired judge or a retired Supreme Court judge will get fairly 5 years to start with.
Right.
In case of the NCLT, the provisions have also been made where the technical members as well as the judicial members can be drafted from the lawyers and from even the existing judicial members.
Right.
And they can go up to the age of 65.
Right.
So fairly, those persons who wish to be in the longer tenure as a judicial member, and since the judicial member will be also heading the each tribunal's bench,
Right.
therefore it has become necessary that they should have a longer tenure, secure tenure, and also that their experience must continue on the bench.
The experience factor will be very, very important because the retired judges will be bringing a long-term experience with the NCLT. That would be definitely helpful.
Right.
And also if you see the provisions that similarly the experience in the practice side, for example, company secretaries, chartered accountant, cost and works accountants must have a fairly a long area of practice of 15 years.
Right.
Similarly, the lawyers also who are eligible under the constitution to become the high court judges of
After
more than
10
10 years
More than
practice,
10 years practice.
are also can be drafted as judicial members
In these tribunals.
in this
In these
tribunal.
Can we move on to a slightly different subject? Can we talk a bit about this compounding of offences, compounding of violations under the Act? What is the jurisdiction for compounding? In what circumstances can something be compounded? When is it that you can settle a proceeding under the Companies Act?
You see, compounding of offences has been, the empowerment has been given to two authorities. Number one, tribunal, and second has been given to the regional director up to a monetary limit of 5 lakhs. Wherever fine is imposable up to 5 lakhs, it can be compounded by the regional director.
Right.
Beyond that, it has to go to the tribunal.
Tribunal. So it's a pecuniary jurisdiction.
It's a pecuniary jurisdiction which has been fixed, and a large number of small offences or defaults which can be compounded will go to the regional director. So that way, reserving the time of NCLT at the tribunal for some other important matters. So that's a good scheme, as a matter of fact. There are 2-3 areas, 2-3 types of offences which cannot be compounded, like where the matter is under investigation, where the company is under investigation. So in that case, the compounding of offences is not permissible. The second case is where similar offence has been compounded within 3 years. Then again, there is a restriction that the compounding cannot be done. Beyond 3 years, it will be treated as a first offence. So that's the scheme of compounding, and almost the same scheme which is prevalent.
So do you see the compounding provisions being capable of being administered well? Will it lead to a wide usage of it, or is the legislative stance that minimum number of things should get compounded? What would you say is the legislative policy towards this area?
You see, the legislative policy is that wherever the offence is recognized, accepted, then an opportunity for its compounding should be given to the company. However, I see that the scheme of 447 covering the fraud, the instances of fraud, there may be some conflict between the compounding issue as well as the provisions of 447. whether it should be covered under fraud and then it should be compoundable or not. So that conflict is likely to arise.
But see, to my mind, the mandate is very clear that they wanted to have the preference for a certain amount of compliance rather than punishment.
Right.
So the motto behind the Companies Act appears to be comply and not punish.
Right. In which case, the approach should be a liberal one towards
Compounding of the
Compounding.
offenses.
so that if it's like a traffic signal violation, you
If you,
do a ticketing and let the flow continue rather than
Yes,
Yes.
and
put
it's
people
not
out.
necessarily that if the offenses are compounded, then it will not have a deterrent effect on the company.
Right.
It can also have a deterrent effect because, as you say, that if you become a habitual offender,
Right.
then your offense may become the offense which will not be compounded under the provisions of the Companies Act.
Right.
So, in the first places, the emphasis is on the compliances. And if you become an habitual offender, then you can be punished by saying that, sorry, we will not compound the offense anymore. And the present trend in the compounding appears to be that slowly and slowly after the compounding of the company becomes aware that this kind of a offense, if you reoccur, then it may not be compoundable and then you will be punished severely.
Right.
so the company has to exercise care and diligence, specifically because a similar offense cannot be compounded within 3 years again.
Right.
So that means once you have committed a mistake, be vigilant, be careful, comply with, and don't reoccur the
Try
offense.
not to repeat your mistakes.
Yes.
So I have two other questions to ask in connection with compounding. So would it be correct, if I understood you right, to say that when you compound, you also admit the guilt
Yes, it's an
and only compound the penalty, or would it be a compounding without admission or proving the guilt? What would be the legal status?
See, the issue is that if you go for a compounding, the first thing you have to admit is that yes, the mistake under the Companies Act has been committed,
Committed.
and indeed I have violated the provisions of the Companies Act. But once you pay the penalty by compounding, it will not amount to be a conviction
Right.
within the meaning of the word conviction under the Companies Act, making you disqualified to be a director or an officer.
So the guilt is expiated.
The guilt is completely apparent on the face of it,
on the face,
but since it will not lead to a conviction,
Right.
it gives you that liberty that even after admitting your guilt, you are not a convict.
Right. Except for the problem of you're doing it again in the next 3 years. You are
When
in
the
that
offense
sense
will
not a
become
convict.
not compounded.
Not
That's
compoundable.
right. That's right. Understood. The other element I wanted to also touch upon is that increasingly the legislative trend is that where any offense is punishable with imprisonment or of a serious nature, regulators have tended to be very reluctant to settle those disputes. So in that light, you don't see that the Companies Act 2013 by itself gives a policy stance one way or the other.
Yes, I see to that extent that even in the Companies Act 2013, it is also very apparent that the offenses which are punishable with imprisonment are not compoundable.
So to that extent,
So to that extent, the mandate is very clear that if you get into a commission of a serious offense,
Serious.
Right.
which is punishable with imprisonment, then it will not be open for you to pay the penalty and get away with it.
right. So all those provisions which have imprisonment as an element of penalty, like fraud or misstatement, etc.,
Are not
are
compoundable.
not compoundable. And
That's
therefore,
true.
when a particular set of facts and circumstances are taken up for compounding, it will be a jurisdictional fact to first determine whether these facts would lead to an offense punishable with imprisonment, and only then can the
That is the
compounding
one way of looking at it.
Right.
The second way of looking at it, that the section itself provide for the penalty
Right.
of imprisonment. Therefore, any offense under this section per se will not be compoundable.
So if a show cause narrates a section,
And it says that this section is violated
Then-
and the section provides for a culmination of an imprisonment,
right, then you can't.
then
even-
you can't apply under that
That's
section
an-
for a compounding of the offense. And this has been a practice even in today's Company Law Board and the regional director.
In fact, when you go for compounding offense, you are going for a specific offense committed on a particular section of
And a
the
specific
act.
charge.
So the charge is very specific, the provisions are very specific, the penalty is either by way of fine or by way of imprisonment or both or only by imprisonment. These are all well defined within this section itself.
Right. So one can't say that had this gone to trial, I would have proved that it is not fraud, and therefore you entertain compounding. That avenue is not available.
That avenue is not open, obviously, for the reason that whether you are ultimately convicted or let off
is a matter for trial.
is a matter for trial.
And
it's
this
not
is
a
to
matter for
avoid
compounding.
trial. That's it.
Therefore, compounding means that there must be no trial at all.
At all.
That you admit your guilt, play yourself that you are guilty,
Right.
and then get monetary penalty imposed on you, and it will not amount to conviction.
Therefore, it would be fair to say that much will depend on the prima facie case and the charges leveled in the show cause notice.
In the show cause
And a
notice.
particular section.
And the particular section
Correct.
side.
Read with this section.
And that is how the most of the show cause notices are issued,
Right.
that there is a violation of so and so section, so and so section, so and so section.
Right.
If any section which mentions a penalty leading to an imprisonment, then that will become a offense which will not be compoundable under the Companies Act.
Can we now move to another subject? This is about mediation and conciliation and the provisions on that in the Act. Could you elaborate for the readers what is the policy here? What does the law say?
These provisions are very new to the 2013 Act. The basic approach which seems in bringing out these provisions is to settle various issues by way of a mediation process or reconciliation process instead of a long drawn process of trial. So these are good move in the new Act.
So how exactly would this process work? What would have to be done to invoke this jurisdiction of mediation?
You see, the mediation panel will be drawn by the central government.
Okay.
Whenever there is any subject matter which is either considered by the central government appropriate to be referred to for mediation, the matter can be referred, or upon the application by the parties thereto, this can be referred to the mediation panel.
Let me add to this that if you see the present civil procedure code, which is being followed by the original side high courts as well as the original side courts throughout the country, there is a specific provision that there is a mandate to every judge that before the case goes for a trial, one opportunity will be provided to all the litigants before the court to go and have a mediation.
Right.
And most of the high courts and most of the district courts have a mediation cell. Most of the bar association in the country now also has a mediation cell where there are expert mediators who specialize in mediating and hearing the parties patiently and working out. Same is the concept which has also come under the Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1986. Now, if you combine both the provisions of the CPC and Arbitration and Conciliation Act, the same concept have now been incorporated in the Companies Act. That in most of the cases where there is a dispute between the company and its shareholders, there is a dispute between the shareholder and the shareholder, there is a dispute between the central government and the shareholder, there is a dispute between the depositors and the company, or the depositors and the company and the shareholders.
Right.
Now, all these disputes, rather than going for a trial in a civil court or going in a trial before the tribunal, can also be sent to a mediation or a conciliation.
Right.
And the parties can voluntarily agree that we will after the mediation either sign an amicable settlement
Right.
between the parties, or they can even leaving to a binding amicable settlement and then report to the tribunal, report to the authorities, or report to the central government to say that we have reached this. You give it a shape of a order or give it a shape of a decree.
Right. I have a legal question for you for the benefit of our viewers. An order passed pursuant to a settlement will not have jurisprudential precedent value, or can it? And in what circumstances?
With my personal opinion, it will not have any precedent value, because most of the conciliation and mediation are based on the consent of the parties.
Consent.
Right.
So it's not a decision on merits. any judgment which does not have a decision
ruling.
on merits of the case
Right.
cannot amount to be a ruling or a precedent to
Right.
be quoted and to be followed in other cases.
In other
Right.
cases.
Dr. Kumar, do you feel commercially as a man in the industry, do you feel there is some persuasive value, or at least not to convince a court of law, but for a businessman to take a decision that in another situation where a similar fact pattern, similar, not the same, arose, this is how the parties resolved it?
Yeah.
That may be useful.
This will have a persuasive value, and I can tell you that in the industry, the companies are interested to settle the matters instead of long-drawn court processes.
Right.
We always try to conciliate with the people, to accept mediations, to go for arbitration, and try to see that the matters are amicably settled as early as possible. So I'm sure that though the orders by mediation panels may not be having any legal or jurisprudential value, but of course that will be definitely a guideline to the corporates to follow the course.
Right.
Or I can put it this way, that they will have a good faith following.
Good faith.
Right.
That when you find out that so and so parties have settled in this manner,
Right.
this can give you some confidence.
Right.
It can also give you some kind of encouragement
Right.
to have the same good path followed.
It enters the human mind
It
also.
enters the human mind. Like
the
I'll give you
judicial
an example, that once the families starting dividing their businesses in the families by way of a conciliation and family settlement agreement, number of big families in the country
Followed the same
followed the same pattern.
Right. And it would rather be.
So I think it will be a good idea that once you have, let us say 10, 15, 20 or 25
Right.
good mediation orders,
Right.
then that may follow in a good faith following.
Right.
In the all other parties in the similar circumstances, maybe that it can't be quoted as an example
Right.
of a precedent or as a jurisprudence value.
binding precedent, but
precedent, but it will
the
certainly
factual
have
precedent.
some encouragement
Right.
to follow.
Right.
And if you go to the proceedings of company law board as of now, even in the matters of dispute between the directors and directors, or the shareholders and shareholders, or between the groups, the conciliation process is suggested first by the company law board
always a
also, and this
nudge
has been in practice for years together.
Right.
And as far as I have seen, maximum of cases have gone through the process of settlement, as Mr. Chaudhary.
One buying the other out.
The other out, or reaching to
Court-appointed valuer.
reaching to some amicable
Right.
settlement. It has been accepted. So I think this provision will definitely give a solid way to the people to resolve their dispute.
And as a regular practitioner before the Company Law Board, I can even vouch that safely at least about 40 to 50% of the cases before the Company Law Board are in fact settled without giving any judgment on
Right.
merits.
Right. Because the very strength of the and the expense of the litigation
Yeah.
ahead nudges people towards the settlement.
And the counseling
the
also,
interest that the members and the chairman of the Company Law Board takes in working it out.
Right.
And similarly, even the Company Law Board, Bar Association has a separate panel of the mediators, which include certain senior advocates and also very senior practicing company secretaries.
Right. So this only now formalizes and
Formalizes
creates
the,
a statutory framework.
the actual
for the same
practice which was already
process which
going
is
on
being
in the
followed.
corporates.
In this light, could we very briefly touch upon the provisions relating to class action suits in the Act? What's novel about it? Is it not something that could otherwise have been done? Any perspective you'd like to share on that subject?
See, I can say that class action suit, which has been now borrowed as a separate concept, is actually in some form already present.
Right.
For example, I also see that a single member or 100 members going to the Company Law Board in a 397-398 petition under the Companies Act 1956, which provision is also now incorporated, is actually nothing but a representative action.
That's right.
Now, since it's already a representative action, you can always ask for the relief to be molded by the Company Law Board, which may suit not only the petitioner, but all the members.
All those classes.
The only difference which I see now, the class action suit, which will add to this present existing jurisdiction will be that whereas the jurisdiction relating to operation and mismanagement will be only relating to the affairs of the company to set them right.
Right.
the class action suit can ask even for more than the setting aside the mismanagement
Right.
or the operation. It can even ask for a compensatory damages to be
Right.
paid to the persons who are litigating either against the company or against the directors or against the shareholders.
So it goes beyond just interdicting a proposed course of action.
Yes,
Or
and
an
it gives
existing
them a
course.
wider canvas
Right.
to claim more damages and more compensatory
And
costs.
disgorgement and all.
And
of
now the management of the companies, I would add, will have to be vigilant, transparent, and careful that as a result of their wrong actions or say misfeasance or negligence, the shareholders can pull them into the court and seek compensatory damages. So that will probably bring more disciplined management in the companies.
that. Right.
And I can also add a small thing here that right now it will possibly reduce one risk for the companies, that since there was no class action suit probabilities under the Companies Act, most of the class action suits were going as a PIL
Right.
in the form of a writ to the various high courts. And no doubt they were also propelled by the competitors. They were propelled by the shareholders. They were propelled by the brokers at the
NGOs
back
formed
of
overnight.
NGOs formed overnight, the welfare associations formed overnight. Now to do away with these malpractices, at least we have a judicial statutorily recognizable provision
Forum.
which gives you the right to legitimately claim
Right.
damages if they are due and payable to you.
And when such a framework is available, you might as well use
You
it.
might well use it
Right.
and not fall into the trappings
Right.
of the various parties which are propelling such a litigation from the back.
Right.
The habitual litigants might be discouraged because now the process is very clear to the companies, as Mr. Chaudhary has said. So there have been a large number of such instances which have unnecessarily harassed the company management. So I hope when the system has been laid down statutorily and the procedure is clear, the tribunal is one body. To
Equally,
deal
the
with such
genuine shareholders
so
and
genuine
investors can actually
shareholders
use
would
it.
come, the genuine problems and disputes would come, and genuine claims would come. So that will definitely ease out, on the other hand, to the company's management. Yeah.
And I'm of the view that this will possibly cleanse the system,
Right. Which is a very positive
which
note.
is very,
Yeah.
very
That's
positive
a very positive.
role
Yeah. So before
to
we
be played.
yeah. So before we wrap up, if I could invite each of you to summarize in your words in a minute or two, any perspectives you have on the scheme of enforcement and punishment or the judicial hierarchy, any other aspect that we've not covered, or any overriding message that you or theme that you see in the provisions,
See,
that would be useful.
according to me, the most important thing which has happened to the Companies Act 2013 by establishing the National Company Law Tribunal, its appellate authority, and the second appeal on a pure question law to the Supreme Court, will at least bring one thing, that it will bring expediency to the litigation. So now you can foresee that the winding up used to take years and decades. By the time the assets of the companies will rot, by the time the whole assets will be dissipated, now this will at least not happen, and there will be a quick end to the litigation between the shareholders and the company in the winding up, the rehabilitation, the revival. So the whole judicial process is expedited in a corporate consolidation of the jurisdiction before the NCLT.
Right.
In my opinion, the new scheme for the adjudicatory purposes, for the trial of criminal offences, and for the civil matters or the corporate matters, the scheme has been well drawn in the new 2013 Act. And as Mr. Chaudhary has said, definitely it will ease out the process for the corporates, for the other stakeholders also. Of course, the companies have to see the new provisions with the care that they have to become compliant, they have to become vigilant, and they have to become transparent in the entire administrative process of the corporates, and that's what I perceive with these new enforcement mechanism.
Right. So on that positive note, I think we've run out of time to discuss this subject. That's all from us on this issue. On this episode, we'd encourage viewers to go to the relevant provisions of the Act and review them. The idea of these episodes is to only give you a very broad overview and a nodding acquaintance with the concepts in the Companies Act 2013. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
a very
Thank you.
lively
Thank you very
discussion.
much.
Thank you.